to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, welcome to Undistracted. I'm your host, Laura Bennett, and this is the podcast where we learn from our guests how to be better at building our lives with intention around our passions, our purpose, and deal with some of the stuff that can get in the way of it. You can find video versions of many of these conversations on the Hope 1032 YouTube channel. You can also subscribe wherever you're listening. Are you a mum or a dad who views parenthood not just as something that you've fallen into because you have a kid, but as a calling, as something that brings you purpose in and of itself? Are you ever distracted in that pursuit? Do the details of school and everything that comes with that sometimes just feel a little bit overwhelming? Our guest today is Colett Smart, a psychologist, qualified teacher, speaker, and internationally published author of They'll Be Okay, 15 Conversations to Help Your Child Through Troubled Times. Colette also hosts our Raising Teens podcast, and I wanted Colette to come on the show to talk about some of the things that we can find really challenging as a new school year begins, and also why she is so passionate about seeing families be intentional about parenting, about education, and helping your kids find their own sense of identity and purpose. Let's welcome Colette to the show.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
As a family, I mean, you've got a few kids yourself. How do you begin to shape expectation and what you want a new school year to look like?
I think every year comes with its own fresh excitement and fresh challenges. I always talk about change at this time of year, I think, because naturally with New Year, we kind of think of change, New Year, even though it's just a new date that rolls over. But with schooling, it is the obvious time of change. And whenever we look at change, any kind of change brings stress, even good change. Even going on a holiday can have a bit of stress attached to it, whether it's the packing, planning, whatever. But we have some kinds of change for some of our kids, which might be kindy or high school, or some kids starting a new school. And so there's a whole lot of new unknowns with that. So new friends, you might not know where the teacher's classroom is. You don't know what your teachers are going to be like, which teacher you will get. We've also come off of a holiday time where it's really chill. I love holidays because I don't get to pack school lunches. It's my favorite thing of school holidays. But around that time, it's really chill generally, especially the December holidays. There's no routine, there's no homework, no uniforms and so on. And routine is good for us. I'm not saying it's not good to get back into getting back into this routine, but it can feel a little bit like you're unfit mentally. So if you think of, you might be a brilliant runner, but you jump into the pool suddenly and you're swimming and you end up with different muscles that are sore. And so you've had a really good rest, but you're coming back into a new routine. So it feels a little bit like your mental muscles are a bit uncomfortable at this time of year.
Yeah, and even, the routine is one thing, and it is that adjustment to bring yourself back into it. But there can really be quite an emotional load, I think, not just for the parents, but kids who are perhaps starting, yes, a new school year, but maybe even going from primary into high school, into those final couple of years of school as well. As families experience that, whether you're a child, whether you're a parent, thinking, oh my goodness, these are the last years my children are at school, as the case may be, why is there such an emotional load in our approach to school?
Well, I think it comes back to what I've just mentioned about the change. I think because all change can cause some form of stress. So you're carrying that kind of stress. And it's that mental adjustment to everything that's new or different. And particularly if some of our kids are starting high school for the first time and starting primary school for the first time, the parents carry it as well. Parents carry that emotional load because you want your child to start strong. You want them to have a good year. You do have hopes for their education. You hope that they have good teachers or they enjoy their subject. So it's something I think parents carry just as much because we want what's best for our kids. And so it's not just a new week that rolls over. A lot of new stuff comes with that. And that is emotional. It brings on a whole lot of things you carry as a family.
When does that become problematic? You know, that uncomfortableness with change or that feeling of emotion swelling around this stuff, when does that become problematic as opposed to just something that's normal at this time of year?
So I think if you have a child who is really struggling with even getting out of the car in the mornings at the start of a school year, or they are not wanting to get out of bed, they're really struggling with getting any kind of routine going, almost resisting. Some children it will be obvious they're resisting in the sense of not wanting to get out of bed. They look really down or afraid. Some children, their resistance comes as outbursts and anger and meltdowns. And for a lot of our kids in the first week of school, many of our kids will actually have a kind of decompression after school, which will look like a meltdown for some kids, or they'll have an outburst, lash out at their siblings, lash out at their parents. Some will just want to retreat. So I think we need to be a bit gentle with our kids and not take things personally as parents. And I'm talking to myself because I kind of forget that often as a mum. But if you're seeing your children not wanting to get out of bed, or those outbursts are really explosive and you're thinking this is bigger than what I would expect, that's when we need to really be reaching out to the school, to the principal, teachers, school counselors. I worked in schools for so long, and there's so much that schools can do if they know that you need support.
Yeah.
They can have buddy systems where they can make sure a friend is there to meet a child as they get out of the car, kiss and drop, or whatever the school calls it. There could be teachers that are there to just take the child in, particularly your young children who are happy to walk in with a teacher. Your teens will usually want a friend or someone there with them rather than an adult. But there are so many support systems around, but parents need to be the voice for their children and let the school know that your child is struggling and get some help early on. The sooner we get our children into a routine in school, the smoother it becomes. If we wait too long, it can get tricky.
Yeah, and it probably helps things be a little bit smooth for the parents as well, because when your kids are happy, you as a parent tend to be a heck of a lot happier as well. So it helps the family system as a whole, but especially for working parents. Does the way that you carry your stress and everything that you face in the day, does that affect the stress and pressure that your child may feel in their everyday experience of what in their day is school? But does the pressure kind of transfer between the two?
Absolutely. And I think this is not to load guilt on parents, but it is our role as parents to kind of set the temperature at home, because our children will bounce off of what we feel and we bring home and the atmosphere that we bring into the homes, because kids are sponges, even teens. So they take on our emotions and our stressors. They can sense it, even if we don't tell them we're struggling at work or there's something emotionally going on in the home. They will pick up something is going on, even if they don't know exactly what it is. So it's not that we shouldn't be human as parents at all. It doesn't mean that we can't have bad days, and we can even talk about having bad days. That's an important part of teaching our children how to manage stress or manage difficult days. But I think we need to watch how we talk about stress, try to change our language and not use words like I'm falling apart or this is all too much, I can't take this anymore, because our children start to use that language about school. The things that we say, we model to our children in stressful times. And so talk about what it feels like to be stressed, but then also talk about who you might talk to as an adult, and talk about that I need to, as an adult, still exercise and have times to relax, and also say sorry when we've brought stress into the home and we've been snappy. But I think we also need to then watch our own fears for our children's futures, because a lot of our fears about our children come across as well. And we have these anxieties about our children, how they'll do at school and what that will lead to. And for our children, then they start to take on that the world's a scary place or a dangerous place. And if I don't do well, my life is ruined. So we need to talk about hope and options and short and medium-term goals. Mission Australia comes out every year with their surveys of young people, and children's concerns about the future and the environment are very big for our young people at the moment. So we need to think as parents, how can we encourage our children that there is hope, and what can they bring to the world now and also in their future, and that you believe in this generation, that the world isn't doomed. I do believe that this generation is positioned for where they are now. It's not an accident, and we need to give them hope.
Yes, and be examples of that. And it's interesting because not everybody thinks about going to school and how you do your studies, how you approach, setting all of this kind of up within a family system as something that may be driven by values, right? Like clearly you want to bring a sense of hope in the way you approach education and the way your kids interact with the world. But if you're thinking about everything that school is going to demand of your children, of your family, whether it's the extracurricular activities, whether it's the assignments, whatever it might be, how do you determine, to the degree you're able, because some stuff with school you just have to do, whether you like it or not, but when you have the option to say yes or no to what you're filling your calendar with around school, how do you decide what activities get your yeses and what things you say no to?
Yeah, that's always such a big question at this time of year. And I'm a big believer that our children need to be doing something outside of school. They can't just be focusing on schoolwork and going to tutors only around schoolwork. I think it's really important for them to be doing something else. So I think we look for what they love, look for their passions, something that will get them into the community, whether it's sporting or music or youth groups, something that could possibly build a skill, but without the overload. So it's trying to stick with one activity a term if you can as a parent. That's kind of been my rule of thumb as I've had children across the years. I do know that some families and some children like to do a sport and an instrument. And so it's just checking the schedule that your child still has time to see friends and develop social skills, because that is very important. And it's so important for them to have connections with their peers and have some time to relax, and then, have times to do homework, because school is important. But if you perhaps have a child who's doing an elite sport, we also need to check as parents, are you the one pushing that energy, or is that coming from your child? My niece is a brilliant basketball, and it is driven by her. My sister-in-law talks to her all the time about, if this is too much, just let us know. And she loves it. She gets her energy from her basketball. So it's coming from her. But then they've kind of stuck to, well, that's what you do. And then making sure she has tribes around her and friends around her that she can still also relax. So try to stick with one activity per season if you can, and then also the question is, well, what if my child wants to just give up halfway through the season? I'm a big believer in sticking through a season if you've started, because I think that also builds character. But it's okay to be trying lots of things when you're young.
Yeah, do a season and then switch for the next one. And that gives you, I guess that allows you to feel that sense of completion and having seen something through, and then you can pivot as you need to. And as you bring up the elite sport and the basketball, that makes me think as well of how easy, particularly at a young age, we do this all through life, but especially when you're young, so much of your identity becomes attached to those things that you're good at, those clubs that you might be part of, things that you're complimented for are suddenly what you gravitate toward, because it's really empowering, right? To kind of have that response. For parents, for carers, if your child is building a lot of identity around something like that, how do you make sure that their identity isn't wholly in that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with a child really focusing in or honing in on something that they see as a skill that they have. Going back to my niece, she really is passionate about basketball and she lives and breathes basketball. But then her parents have also made sure that she's part of a youth group. So she's got other friends outside of basketball. She still sees family a lot at family functions, and she still does her homework and does school. And so they try to make sure that it's not the only thing and it's the only place where she has friends. They try to expand and make sure that she has other avenues where she can reach out to others. But I do think that many children tend to change around. There's not a lot of children that you see that they do find only one thing and that's their identity. That isn't usually the norm. But for those that do, I really don't have a problem with them really just building that, as long as I said, you're making sure that they still have friendships and groups in other areas of their lives. I think that's important.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of my friends who have kids, I'm the auntie. I'm the one who asks what people are up to on the weekend, and it's got to fit around whatever schedule of the different, sports and kids parties and stuff. Like, I love it. But I hear them often talk about just how many parties there are, how as a parent getting into school, many of them, it's their first child and they've never done this kind of thing before. Navigating the expectations between parents of even what you bring to a birthday party. Are we doing gifts or are we not doing gifts? Do you have to attend every single child's birthday party and then invite every single child to your kid's birthday party as well? For parents who are in that space of going, I just don't know how to relate to the other parents. How do we determine what the rules are? What have you done as a mum to say, this is how I'm going to engage with the other families at the school. This is what I'm going to be able to invest in, so that you kind of almost set the stage for what's okay for all the parents, if that makes sense?
I think if you can be the one who has the courage to actually ask and raise the question with other parents, I think a lot of new parents, particularly if it's your first child and it's the first time you're navigating school parties and school events every weekend, it can feel like you didn't get the memo and you're not sure what the rules are. And I think most people don't know. They're all thinking, well, I don't know what the rules are and should we all be there? And I think if one or two of the parents actually have the courage to say, look, I realize we're all coming to parties and we're all doing this every weekend. I feel like perhaps we could all decide not to have the pressure to buy gifts for such and such amount, or let's all feel like we can stay for a certain amount of time and then go. I really think some people are relieved when one or two parents say, look, can we set some kind of ground rules around this so we don't all feel pressure? You will, of course, have one or two parents who are offended by whatever you bring up or whatever you ask, and that is just how life is. We know that with people we work with. You will have parents who will be offended or hurt, but I think somebody bring it up and raise it is really helpful for everyone. Also, I remember those early years, kindy, one, around there, preschool. As parents, you kind of expected to be at every party. And that's fair because you can't have one parent looking after 25-year-olds on their own.
Thank you.
I was even a qualified teacher and I still wasn't okay with looking after everybody else, the 25-year-olds. So that's understandable that you do go to all those parties. But can I say to parents, it doesn't last forever. I promise you. Very soon that kind of ends. And then you're actually, some of the parents of teens will be listening and saying, yep, now I'm at the point where I don't know, do I call up and find out who's going to be at the party? Do I walk to the door? And my answer is always yes. Call up. I mean, I even did that recently with my third and just initiated a discussion with some of the parents about an event my son wanted to be at with some boys. And the other parents were relieved. Like I was relieved. We all had the same misgivings or questions. And it just takes somebody to do it. And your teens will usually be mortified. But unfortunately, that's one of the non-negotiables of teen parenting, is that there's some things we won't encroach on with them, but some things around partying or them going out when they're teenagers, we must know where they are and who they're with. And that is part of being a responsible parent who loves your child. And if you do it, other parents get the courage to do the same thing.
Yeah, it kind of sets the tone for everybody else, I guess. And I mean, Colette, you've been passionate about families, about raising kids, psychology for many, many years now. Some people may know you host our Raising Teens podcast as well. Why is it so important to you to work in the space that you have chosen and to make sure people, kids, families, everyone are healthy on this individual level, living with purpose, living with some kind of intention around the way we do things?
One of the reasons I started the podcast was actually during COVID, and then it's just grown from there. But I wanted to put an expert in every parent's pocket. I was talking to a parent just yesterday who said that the same line we all use, that our children are never born with a how-to manual. And so often parents are particularly parents of teens, I say to them, sometimes you're some of the loneliest people on the planet, because when you've got a child in early primary, you're all going to the parties, or the mothers are all at a mother's group, and so you're all talking about sleepless nights or potty training or school activities or how's your child handling the new reading or whatever it is. Suddenly, you're not at the parties anymore, so you don't have this network that you realize just you were thrust into. Now that they're gone and you're not talking with other parents about what it feels like to raise a teenager. And so I really want to help parents not to feel alone in their parenting, in their questions, some of their struggles, even the joys. I wanted parents to feel normal, and I want them to feel like their teenagers are also normal, that they can say to their teen, when you're struggling with your insecurities or your doubts, you're actually normal because this is what is going on in your brain, or this is what anxiety looks like and how it shows up, or this is what you do when there's pressure in sport, or whatever it is. There's so many topics I've covered, but there's so many experts that I know that I've just been so grateful to have on the podcast who've just given their time. And it's because I want parents to feel like parenting teens is not as daunting as they thought. And even in those really difficult times with our teens, there is very often a year or two that is very, very hard. And I want parents not to feel alone in that time.
Yes. Is it hard sometimes for you, though, to parent your own kids as a parent and not as a psychologist?
That's probably one of the most common questions I get asked in interviews. And the answer is yes, because I am not my child's psychologist. I am not their teacher. To them, I am just mum. And also, I'm very emotionally involved with my own children, as I should be. So sometimes I can't see clearly even, and I know that I make mistakes, and that I have to remember some of the things the experts who have come onto my podcast have said, and some of the things I tell parents myself. The one thing I say is I'm always apologizing in my home for times that I've messed up. But I would say studying psychology and learning psychology, I originally went into teaching, loved it, and then studied psychology because I did a subject in psychology and fell in love with it. And naturally, because I'd been a teacher, it sort of gravitated towards child and adolescent mental health. And I think what fascinated me about the world of psychology was I really struggled as a teenager. I hated high school. And I think I wanted something that I could do, that I could support teenagers who were struggling, but then also becoming a parent, learning what was the best practice, what is recommended out there that actually is supportive for teenagers' mental health and their social well-being and their friendships. And so a lot of that I definitely use in my parenting, absolutely. And I believe it has helped me become a better parent. But please notice I didn't say a perfect parent. No. I'm not that. But going back to your original question, I am first my children's mum, and then my job comes second. And yes, I make mistakes. And yes, I'm still learning, and I have young adult children now, and I'm still learning how to be a young adult mum. Yeah. So I think I'm learning all the time.
Yeah, and that can be the next podcast, Raising Young Adults, because I think what some people don't realise about hosting a podcast is that we do it as much for the listeners as we do ourselves. Like, it's kind of... Because I love getting to talk to the guests that have been on Undistracted, because I learn so much, and it's my own project of curiosity in some respects, in the same way that, you know, you get to immerse yourself in such brilliant insight into parenting.
Well, exactly. I mean, you'll hear me very often in the podcast when I talk to guests, or I have little spiels in between, I call them, when I ramble on about something. But I often talk about my own children. I don't obviously give any, deep personal details, but I talk about my own parenting struggles or second-guessing myself, or things that I've found that have helped, because I do find talking to some of the experts that I speak to absolutely makes me think, oh, yes, I should try this, or yeah, I did that, and it has worked in my own parenting. So absolutely, the podcast is just as much for me.
Well, let me ask you this, Colette, because I ask a lot of the guests here how to live an undistracted life, right? How to live pursuing the thing that you find purpose in, pursuing the thing that you feel called to, and really addressing some of the things that can distract us from that, get in the way of that. To be an undistracted parent then, what would you say that looks like? How do we get to that place? Because so many parents don't just see it as, I had a child, therefore I am a parent. It is a calling. It is something they find purpose in. How do we pursue that without being distracted?
So I think it's natural to find distractions in our life, even as parents, things that crowd us, whether it's our work or navigating elderly parents that you're also looking after, or technology. Technology is just as much a challenge for us as parents as it is for our children. We're always talking about technology for kids and so on, but really as parents, for us to be present and undistracted is really, for me, fighting that urge to pick up my phone or that urge to go and check something when I'm parenting. It's something that I saw really shift in my parenting from when my children were tiny and we didn't really have phones, or we kind of had the flip phone. And then as I was watching my children play sport or in an activity, suddenly we had smartphones, and that pull to answer a text or check something while you're on the sideline of the sport field, for me, it was a very purposeful thing I continued to do, and I still continue to do, to put my phone away, to be undistracted on the side of the sports field. Trying to, one of the experts that I've spoken to have said, when your child walks into the room, make your face light up. And you can't make your face light up when your child walks into the room if you're looking down at a screen. So I've always tried as much as I can, and I'm not perfect at it, but to, when I sense or notice any of my children walk in, to look up from what I'm doing and engage with them with my eyeballs to actually show that I'm actually noticing and I'm here with you. So it's really, for me, the undistracted is the stereotypical technology, but it's the way that I'm working on all the time, even with my teen and young adult children. Being undistracted is putting down the tech and engaging with them where they're at.
Yes. The glow of a phone does not count as your face being lit up when they come into a room. Colette, such a joy chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I encourage everyone, of course, to check out your Raising Teens podcast if that's the season of life they feel they need to, be diving into it with. But Colette, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Undistracted. You can rate, review it. Love for you to share it with a friend as well. Helps other people find it. And until next time, enjoy living this undistracted life.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.